So you've got a big team. Well, the good news is that team is capable of doing a lot. But as your team gets bigger and bigger, you are going to need to put management structures in place in order to be able to deal with all of that. You can't manage what each person is doing individually. You simply do not have the bandwidth. So you are going to lose the ability to talk directly to each person on your team. Like, you may pass them in the hall, but your ability to directly influence what they're working on is going to be greatly diminished. Each person, each level of the management hierarchy has a different view on the project. You at the top effectively have a map of the project, a very broad understanding of what's being done. But the resolution of that map is pretty low. The people a few levels below you have a much smaller map of a much smaller area of the project, but at greater detail. And you continue down until you get to the individual contributors, where they have a very, very precise understanding of specific parts of the project, but much less of an understanding about what's going on the project as a whole. And it's not practical to have everyone at every level have this same level of understanding of everything on the project. Nobody has the bandwidth to do this. You don't have the bandwidth to understand the minutia of each task, and the individual contributors don't have the bandwidth to understand all the high-level decision-making that's going on in order to steer the project as a whole. But you still need to be coordinated. You still need to provide people with enough in order to do their job and to be able to make good decisions for their day-to-day work, because you shouldn't be making those decisions for them. You want them to be making those decisions on their own. And this is where something like a commander's intent comes in. So what is a commander's intent? A commander's intent is a statement of intention, a goal, a short-term resting place that provides a starting point for decision making. It's designed to start the planning process, not replace the planning process. So this is a leader saying, I want us to get here, and then opening up to the people beneath the leader to do the work, engage in the exercise of figuring out how to get to that point. The reason why I like them is because it engages the team members in the solution process, increases their buy-in and engagement in the solution itself, as opposed to just dictating a solution top down. So you have this fog of war that pervades everything, where people can't see the project as a whole. If you've set vision effectively, you've essentially lobbed this flare out into the darkness, saying this is where we want the project to go. But that's pretty far out into the future. People are over here and they can't really see a path to that future. So then at a smaller scale, at a milestone scale, you are setting essentially subvisions or sub-goals, which are smaller flares that you're throwing into the darkness in much closer of a radius. And then, and this is critical, you have to still descend down into the hierarchy, and each level down is throwing additional flares at even closer radiuses until you're getting to the point where you're making individual decisions on individual tasks. So the purpose of a commander's intent isn't to tell people what to do, it's to serve as the basis of further planning that happens beyond that. So you do a commander's intent at a project level for a milestone, and then at the pillar level, you would do commander's intents for the pillars that support that central commander's intent. And then within the teams of each pillar, you might do goals again to set direction for that milestone for each group within that team. And the end result is you're sort of lobbing these little flares and you're marching towards that ultimate goal. But sometimes what's going to happen is that one of these teams is going to veer off to the side. And sometimes there are really good reasons for that to be happening. Sometimes there's a mountain in the way, but the people on the ground can't necessarily see that mountain. So they're going to be standing there walking at a 90-degree angle to what they see from the commander's intent. And one of two things runs the risk of happening. Either one, they're going to think that the overall leader is an idiot because they can understand why they're going in this direction. Why is the commander's intent pulling them to go in a different direction? Or they're going to align behind that commander's intent and they're going to think that their leader on the ground is an idiot because he's pulling them in a direction other than what they believe is the correct thing to do for the project. Now, ideally, that doesn't happen, but like I said, it's not always possible for everyone to have enough context to understand the decision making happening at every level of the project. So on occasion, this has a very high probability of happening. But what you want is, in these cases, if you're going to have this disagreement, you're much better off with the individual contributor thinking that you are an idiot at the higher level than that their ground level leader is an idiot. Because that ground level leader is the person that's helping them get their work done second to second, minute to minute. So if they think that person is competent, then that person is able to guide the project forward through the actions of the individual contributors, because they should have more visibility than the person below them, so they should understand why they're avoiding that mountain, and that alignment still comes in. This assumes that there is alignment going down your hierarchy, which doesn't always happen. If you have leaders within your hierarchy pulling in directions antithetical to your overall vision, to your commander's intent, with no good reason, then you have a big problem. Unfortunately, there are people who do this, who generate misunderstanding as a way to rally the team around themselves, even in opposition to the project as a whole, who generate conflict, who generate an us versus them culture because it makes their own leadership stronger. If you have people that work like this, you do have to get them off your team, because this is not the kind of leadership that you can allow to fester on your team. But even in that case, I think you have to be very careful about cutting their legs out from under them in terms of their second to second guidance. You want to quietly get them out of these positions of authority without undermining them to their individual devs, because doing so damages the trust in the leadership as a whole. So I know it sucks and it sticks in your craw. I recommend that you shuffle them aside as quietly as possible without undermining the damage that they've done, if you can possibly do that. But most of the time, that's not what's happening. They are avoiding rivers, they're avoiding mountains in order to move towards the goal as best they can. Additionally, you're revealing your direction changes. As you are throwing these flares out into the darkness, the fact that you are pivoting is very hard to escape when that occurs. Now, sometimes that pivot is happening because you've learned more. Sometimes that pivot is happening because you are trying to drive a team around a mountain, but a different team can't see that mountain, so they don't understand why you're pivoting. Unlike simply sticking loudly and confidently to a singular central vision, these commanders' intents, because they are smaller, more tactical, do reveal times when you have no choice but to change direction, even when ultimately you're still moving towards that central original goal. Direction changes aren't great for team confidence because they make the team wonder if you know what you're doing, especially if they don't have the context to understand the reason for the change. And as we've been talking about, you can't always provide every member of your team with enough context to understand every decision that you are making. So sometimes you are going to make a pivot, and sometimes you're going to be able to explain why in a way that the team understands and gets behind. And sometimes you're going to make a pivot and you're not going to be able to explain it effectively. And unfortunately, that's going to have a negative impact on your team's confidence. So given all of that, do you need a commander's intent? Do you even want a commander's intent? Well, you can run a project without one. You can lead without one. And in fact, a lot of leaders do exactly that. But for me, I feel like you're missing an opportunity to provide additional information, additional guidance to your team. And I believe having a well-informed team allows them to act independently more effectively and allows allows the team to get more done as a whole. But some days you're trading your own reputation for that extra information, that more informed team. I personally think you should do it, but I can understand if you feel like this is something that's not worth the consequence. But try to remember, the job isn't to make yourself look good. The job is to make the best game that you can with the resources that you have, while keeping the team as healthy as you can. This isn't about padding your resume. This isn't about making yourself look great. This isn't about avoiding conflict. So sometimes you, as the leader of a project, need to do the things that are the right thing to do, even if they're potentially damaging to your own reputation, to your own standing. Do I believe that Commander's Intent are a tool that you should be using? I do, because I believe that you want to provide an overarching goal that people can look at, even though they may not be able to draw that path to that goal directly. It helps them make those decisions on the ground, because they can usually see whether or not a decision is going to be supportive or destructive towards that overarching goal. Even though it does potentially open you as the leader up to people thinking that you're out of touch or not understanding what's happening on the ground level, I do think that overall it is highly supportive to the project as a whole. The thing that I might actually be less certain about is that overarching vision of the project as a whole. And I know this sounds insane, but because that goal is so far in the future in some cases, what can happen is that your team, your individual contributors, your lower level leaders can look at that bright, shining flare in the darkness and only see how far away it is and not be able to focus on the things they need to do to move forward. So do I think you should not have that flare out in the darkness, that vision for the project as a whole? I don't think I'm quite there. Like they say, if you wish to build a ship, do not divide your men into teams and send them into the forest to cut wood. Instead, teach them to long for the vast and endless sea. I do think that vision, that ambition is useful because it serves as a rallying point. But like I said, it can sometimes become a source of worry and stress for a team that is having difficulty seeing there from here. I've definitely seen that overarching high-level goal derailing a team, causing a team to get stuck in worry about the future, when the right thing for them to do is to just figure out how to take the next step forward. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you are interested in becoming a member, there will be a link down in the description. If you found this video interesting, please give it a thumbs up. That will help YouTube know that it's garnering some interest and help it share it with more people. If you've been on a large team, how are some ways that communication was done at the different levels? How was your structure set up? I'm always interested in hearing how different teams run their structures, especially for large teams that tend to be quite unwieldy. I will see you again soon. Thank you.